Hello everyone, this is my fossil fuel lab for my science method course. In this lab we'll discuss what are fossil fuels, how are they created, and then we'll be creating some fossil fuel through an experiment using cereals. Now, what are fossil fuels? Are they just fossils that we put in our car for fuel? Just like this? I don't think so. Fossil fuels are a natural, non-renewable resource created from the rock cycle processes in which plants and animals die from millions of years ago. They decay, and as they decay, more sediment and soil comes on top and layers it, creating multiple layers, and then when it's at the bottom, it has all of these rock layers on top, which create pressure, and then because it's on the bottom, it's closer to the mantle, which there's heat, lots of heat. So pressure and heat form these organic materials into fossil fuels that we can use today in our electricity or in our cars and all sorts of types of energy resources. So for coal specifically, it uses organic materials such as plants. Now the plants die, then they get sent on the bottom through all this layering, pressure and heat, and then you'll have coal. And then for oil and natural gas, the other two types of fossil fuel, instead of using just plants, they use little tiny little animals such as zooplankton and plants such as algae. So all of that dies and decays, especially millions of years ago. The ocean floor, everything sinks down, and then sediment layering, same thing with pressure and heat will create oil and natural gas. Natural gas actually requires more pressure and more heat to get that resource. So to learn a little bit more about that, my class would watch this video. And then after the video, we'll discuss in our lab packets that I'll hand out. So here we have fossil fuels. And then I would have pictures describing different types of fossil fuels and how they're created, resources that were used in the video to help visualize what's going on. And the same thing at the second page for oil and natural gas. And then on the back of the packet, we'll actually be doing the lab. Now in this lab, we'll be using food. So I'll note to my students that they will not be allowed to eat the food during the lab. It is prohibited. But after the lab, they may have some snacks. I'll have some baggies ready that they can take from the extras. But anything that we used in the lab will be thrown away, because these cereals will actually be crushed through pressure. So our different types of material that we have is our measuring cups. This is what I used setting up the lab before the students even get there. So I can measure out the different cereal. So cereals that I chose to use for this: Lucky Charms, but without any of the marshmallows, Corn Flakes, Golden Grams, and I didn't have a dark cereal, so I just used Blueberry Cheerios instead of, I wanted to use Crispies, chocolate Crispies, but we didn't have any at home. And I also used coffee, but since coffee is a staple in this household, I used decaf, since not a lot of people drink that. Doesn't matter which type. And I used a half a cup of each cereal, and I put it into these bags pre-made for the students. And then I used a 1/4 cup of the coffee grounds and the darker cereal. They'll be mixed together. Now, each of these cereal represents a rock layer. So I laid it out as from bottom to top. This is what we're looking to be the coal. And then we have our next layer, the golden grams, a little bit darker. Then this one, this is going to be representing our shale, because they're flat corn flakes. And then lastly, our topsoil and sand, the lightest colored of the cereal. So let's begin the lab portion. Now for this lab, we will not need to use any types of safety materials, such as safety setup as goggles and aprons and gloves. We won't need that for this lab since it's only just cereal. I'll make sure that my students keep within their groups so that cereal won't be flying all over the room. Keep it on the table, in their area, not eating it. So throughout the lab, they will be layering their cereal, and they will be recording what each layer represents. Now, in the previous lesson, we talked about rock layers and the rock cycle, so they should be familiar with the different types of layers that these are going to represent. If they don't, they can ask their table mate, or they can refer back to their last class notes for some help, or I'll be walking around and checking on the groups and see how they are doing. So while they do that, they'll be filling out a observation chart for their model. They'll have two parts. So they have a part where they'll be drawing in each layer, and then after they put all of the layers in, they have their second cup, 2 cups, one filling it, and the second, one student will have their hand compress all of the rock layers and act as years of pressure. And then they'll draw that and note some observations that they noticed. So let's begin the lab. So now it's time to do the experiment part of the class period. Each student within their packet will have the procedure, and they'll be in groups of roughly 4 depending on the class size. Each student will have a job to do, such as reading directions, handling materials, being the reporter, and so forth. So I will be playing as all of the students within this demonstration and noting when another student will be helping out. For this part, I will read the directions and then do what the directions say. So part 1 is creating the soil. So I need to crush all of the bags and make sure that they are fine and like sand. I'll have the students do that in any way, just not tearing the bags or ripping them or using their feet to stomp on them. They'll be crushing them with their hands. They can use their fist, they can use their palm, just on the table. And I'll have a period of 2 minutes to do this. Maybe each student can get a bag to crush the material. I'll do my best within 2 minutes to get all of this done. And if I notice it's taking too long, I'll come around with a rolling pin and just roll it for them. But it's a fun part of the lab. Breaking it down, this can be a review of weathering, breaking rocks down into smaller pieces. Alright, so I'm back from crushing all of the cereal. I don't know if it was noticed, but they are labeled. we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. All done. I found the best method for crushing all of them was a pen, expo marker, or pencil, and just to get the little fine bits. So after crushing them all, now it's time to move on to the next step. So then the next step, the students would be taking their first bag, labeled number 1, opening it, taking one of the cups, and one student will be pouring while holding, another student will be holding the other cup. I'll be doing all at once. And there we go. We have a bottom layer. And then in their journals, they will record what organic material does the mixture of bag 1 represent. In this case, it would be the coal. So they'll do that for each one of the layers. So now we have to do next 2. I won't be writing in there now. I can show you afterwards. So now we have our second layer. If you can see that, looks good. 3. So they record. We're getting lighter as we get to the top. It's a little bit less distinct, but there is a layer. There's a third layer in there. It is slightly lighter. And then our last, final 4th layer, topsoil and sand. This is very powdery mixture. So this one's definitely crushed a lot. Alright, so then the students would draw all 4 layers, and then after doing that and saying what each layer represent, they would take their cup. One student would take the cup and press down a lot. This might take a little bit of time. I'd leave another 2 minutes to do this portion. And there would be another student holding the cup, and this student pushing all their might down. Make sure that their hand doesn't get hurt by breaking the cup or anything like that. So now we have the final product. Now the final product, there's not a huge difference. It went down like a couple little rings around the cup, but you can definitely tell that it's more solid on the base. It's harder, and just like in real life, coal over time and more pressure and more layers, you'll get harder coal that will have better heat and everything, because it has been on the bottom for longer periods of time, hardening. So in this activity, the students will record their observations, what they noticed, how it was compressed more, all the pressure that it took to crumble up all of the stone that is in the cup, and then just adding imagination of heat, what that would look like, what it would be if it was really cold. So this would be the end of the lab. The students would just dump the rest of the remains in the trash because they've been touching and using all of this. And then anything that they want to take home with them, I can have little baggies ready and available for them. Any other materials such as these cups can also be recycled. So that is the end of the lab. They'll turn in their packets and then for a grade, and at some point at the end of the unit maybe, and then that would be it. Wipe down the tables, clear everything out, and then we can move on. So thanks for watching.